So we've been telling you about the social media. Hang on. So we've been telling you about the censorship that's been happening on social media, and they not only did they purge 800 lefty news sites back in October, but it's not stopping, and it's in collusion with government. The German Marshall Fund, which is funded by NATO and the United States, has been pushing not only Russiagate, but smears against progressive politicians such as Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. And, well, it's getting even worse. So we told you about this before. This is from Rania Kalik. She said Facebook has suspended all of the In the Now Facebook pages, apparently in coordination with CNN, on the grounds that In the Now doesn't disclose who funds it. This is an outrageous standard that is not applied to other outlets like NPR and AJ Plus, etc. So here's CNN. Here's the story. Russia is so now we've told you that CNN has an interest in scaring advertisers away from Facebook and YouTube and anywhere else, right? Because CNN's average age viewer is somewhere around 70 years old. Nothing against people who are 70 years old, but they're not as attractive to advertisers. So CNN has been transparently launching a campaign to try to scare advertisers away from other platforms. And so now they're also doing it by pushing Russiagate and other things. And we've been caught up in CNN's horrible reporting on this. And it's not reporting, it's propaganda pushed for money. So there it is. Russia is backing a viral video company aimed at American millennials. And it took about 4 people to write that article, by the way. It took 4 people to write such a horrible article. And look how horrible this article is. It says 3 online video channels designed to appeal to millennials have collected tens of millions of views on Facebook since September. Sounds ominous. Tens of millions of views. Wow, kids like watching this video. Right? But the pages pushing the videos do not disclose they are backed by the Russian government. Facebook suspended the pages on Friday, saying it would reach out to the people running them to ask that they disclose where the pages are run from and their affiliation with their parent company in order to get back on the platform. That's weird that they banned them, and then they're going to reach out to them to ask them to do something. And why is that weird? Well, it's because this was never asked of them before, and it's a standard that no one else has to live up to. The move was an unusual one for Facebook. The company does not require users to provide information about parent companies. But they banned them anyway. So do you understand how they just made up a rule in the middle of the night? An unelected bureaucrat gets to decide who gets free speech and who doesn't. And at the behest of who? At the behest of CNN's advertising dollars and the German Marshall Fund. So we'll go a little bit further. The Mafic media pages appear to have fallen into a gray area, says CNN. The pages do not include information about their links to the Russian government, but they were not previously required to. And CNN doesn't go, which is pretty effed up, right? That they would just ban somebody without making up a rule in the middle of the night. That you would think that would happen. So now I'm going to bring in so we have with us Rania Kalik. She's a friend of the show, journalist who's not afraid to expose the truth. She's the producer and writer of In the Now and the co-host of Unauthorized Disclosure. Please welcome back to the show, Rania Kalik. Hi, Rania. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for covering this, because not a lot of outlets did, at least from the perspective you're coming from.
Oh, really? So you've seen it covered by a different... Well, I saw CNN cover it. They look like 2 jackasses.
Well, everyone just echoed what CNN was saying, except for alternative outlets. Everyone literally just took CNN's story, and CNN completely manufactured a story. And
Yes.
It's funny just hearing you review it all again, because it's so crazy.
They just made up that. So this is just like there's a company called New Knowledge, right? And that's why the Senate report and all the newspaper reports about Russian bots have been based on this company called New Knowledge. And it was found out that New Knowledge was actually creating their own fake Russian bots. And then they would sell you. And why would they do that? So then they were actually creating fake Russian bots saying that other politicians were being supported by them. Right-wing politicians were being supported by Russian bots that they invented. And why would they do that? Because the new knowledge are grifters, and they're going to sell you a solution to Russian infiltration, and they're going to make your internet safe. And so they're selling to their grifters, right? And so nobody tells you any of this stuff, and especially CNN isn't going to tell you that stuff. So now you were interviewed by CNN about this story, and I thought it's very interesting because they were shocked to find out that you had actually had editorial control over what you did in your videos.
Yeah, this guy who interviewed me, Drew Griffin, repeatedly. It was more like an interrogation, by the way. It felt like a police interrogation, not an interview. But it was a 45-minute long interrogation. He repeatedly asked me over and over if I had editorial freedom, editorial control. He just couldn't fathom that anybody would. I think partly because he doesn't have any at CNN. But I responded to him. I told him, yeah, I have complete editorial freedom over the videos that I make, and I write my own scripts. And my boss, Anissa Nawi, allows me to do this. And then I asked him, where was Mark Lamont Hill's editorial freedom when CNN fired him for telling the truth about Palestinian suffering and Israeli occupation? And he just totally glossed it. He just moved on. He didn't even respond to any of my questions. But I pretty much turned everything around on him. But this was really frightening to me in many ways because it was a situation where CNN and the U.S. government are winning in different ways. The U.S. government is using outlets like the German Marshall Fund that it funds to try and, censor media it doesn't like, but it's doing it in an indirect way. So it's not actually a violation of the First Amendment because it's doing it through these think tanks that it funds. So these think tanks will go to outlets like CNN or the Atlantic Council will advise Facebook. The Atlantic Council is also funded by the U.S. government to shut down certain accounts. So it's not actually the U.S. government doing it. So on the one hand, you have this sort of indirect censorship by the government that's really creepy. And then on the other hand, you have an outlet like CNN that, before Trump was elected, I think these mainstream cable news outlets they were dying industry.
Yes.
And the election of Trump resurrected them and sort of breathed new life into them. And so now they're spending a lot of their new, capital and this bigger audience that they've gained to try and shut down alternative voices they see as a challenge. And they're colluding with the U.S. government, with U.S. government-funded think tanks, I should say, to do that. And it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's just an attempt also to, get advertisers to stay away from alternative outlets so CNN can keep them. But it's just like a dirty business practice on their part. So it's all one massive grift. But in the end, it's just incredibly creepy the way Facebook is under this sort of intense pressure to censor on behalf of these U.S. government-funded outlets, and CNN is helping them do that. And they recently did it also with Jordan Sheraton's show, Status Quo. CNN helped, launch some sort of copyright violation accusation to get YouTube to ban him from live streaming for like 3 months. So CNN has really been at the forefront of trying to shut down alternative media.
Yeah, they definitely don't. And people don't realize what it really is about. It's just that CNN isn't really a news organization. They're just a media company that's there to generate profits. That's their first goal and their last goal. They're not. And if they get to report the news along the way, that's just a bonus. But most of the time they don't. Most of the time they're pushing a narrative. Like Jake Tapper literally tells his audience and gaslights CNN's audience by saying that Medicare for all is more expensive than the system we currently have. Yet his Facebook page doesn't get taken down for fake news. And that's not news. That's them pushing a narrative, even though it's been debunked. And by the way, CNN has to hire a fact-checking organization to fact check facts. Like, they're a news organization and they don't know how to do that. They had to hire factcheck.org so they could fact check politicians' lies or not. It's just amazing that they had to go outside the building to figure out how to fact check stuff. That's what CNN does. So, and they're just, and by the way, we've played videotapes of politicians coming on with Wolf Blitzer saying we shouldn't be selling arms to Saudi Arabia. And Wolf Blitzer pushes back on the politicians saying, well, that's going to cost us a lot of jobs. It's like everything's backwards at CNN, right? It's like the politicians have to hold the journalists' feet to the fire to tell the truth at CNN. And so they know that exactly what you were saying. CNN cable news was dying and Trump is a bit. That's exactly what the comedian at the Correspondents' Dinner, Michelle Wolf, said. You guys owe Trump. Why don't you give him some of the money you're making off him because you guys love him. You guys are making so much money off him. You should give him some of your money. And so this is, again, stuff like this. what's happening right now, and that no one else reports this, right? So, and if they do, even lefty news media shows, right? Has any other lefty news media show reported this correctly that you've seen? You've seen?
That I've seen. I think Kyle Kulinski may have mentioned it. You did. And then Shadowproof, my colleague, who's a co-host of my podcast Unauthorized Disclosure, Kevin Gostola, runs the news outlet Shadowproof. So he covered it. But yeah, no, I mean, people were pretty silent about it, which was really stunning because, it's a lot of this has to do with the Russia angle too. I mean, it was no secret that In the Now is a subsidiary of Roughly, which is a subsidiary of RT. That wasn't like a big secret. It didn't take, I mean, it's amazing that Facebook needed 4 people to figure that out.
Right.
Because if you Google it, you'll easily find that information. But I really do think that the left has been so scared and fear and like scaremongered by outlets like CNN into just staying clear of anything even like lightly affiliated with Russia, that they don't care. I mean, RT was forced to register as a foreign agent. And no one really said anything because it's RT, it's gross, it's affiliated with Russia. And that's sort of the mentality you have on the left, which is really, I think, damaging in a lot of ways. Because, I mean, if you look at, for example, what just happened in Venezuela, and you look at where, who's covering it and how they're covering it, across the media spectrum, every single outlet was pro-coup. There was only like independent media outlets, really, small online outlets like yours that were covering it from the proper angle that you don't hear anywhere else, and then outlets like RT. But it's just doing a huge disservice to do this sort of kind of soft boycott of RT and anything affiliated with it by even leftists.
What's even crazier about this particular story is that they're pretending like your video series is somehow sneaking around and misinforming people and keeping stuff secret about your funding. And because they say people want to know where your funding comes from. So if I go to a video by The Daily Show, do they tell me that they're actually funded by Viacom? Do I need to know who their parent? They never do that. No one ever does that. They don't go, hey, by the way, we're owned by Viacom, one of the 6 companies that owns every media company in the United States. They don't do that. By the way, no one cares. Nobody's watching a video of Trevor Noah going, is this from Viacom or is this from CBS Media? I really want to know who the parent. There's no one else does that. And not only that, but CBS News and MSNBC and CNN, if they actually had to disclose who was funding them, they would have to say the military-industrial complex, fossil fuels, and Wall Street.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. A lot of these major media outlets are funded by, like you just mentioned, 6 corporations in America fund 90% of the media. So that means 6 corporations control everything we're seeing, hearing, and watching and reading. I mean, that's scary to think about, but most people have no idea. And when it comes to corporate media outlets, they're actually a lot less transparent. Like, it's really difficult to actually find out exactly whose advertising dollars CNN is most reliant on. Like, we have an idea that it's pharmaceutical companies and weapons companies, but at the same time, we don't really know entirely. CNN doesn't run around saying that their parent company is AT&T.
Right? Exactly. If you watch a CNN video on YouTube, it doesn't go, oh, by the way, we're owned by AT&T. They don't tell you that.
No, they definitely don't. And the reality also is that people don't really care that much. That's right. People aren't that interested. And actually, I wouldn't necessarily oppose some sort of blanket requirement on media outlets to disclose who backs them and who funds them. I'm not against that. It's just in the case of Facebook right now, they're actually only applying it to us. They're not applying it to anybody else. They're not applying it to AJ Plus, which is, funded by Al Jazeera, which is funded by the Qatari government. They're not applying it to NPR, which receives funding from the US government. And they're certainly not applying it to corporate media outlets, because for some reason state media outlets are bad and corporate media outlets are good and benevolent and objective. I don't really get why that's the case.
Max Blumenthal made a great point about all this. So what happened? And you're getting caught up in a web that actually serves lots of different interests, right? So, for instance, CNN has an interest in painting you as somehow undermining American democracy through Russia because they want to get the advertising funds, right? So that's really what that's CNN's angle. But then there's the other angle of the Democratic Party pushing the Russiagate narrative, so that they don't have to talk about that they completely rigged their primary, and of course MSNBC is also going to push it because same thing with advertising, but also they get the cover for the fact that they got exposed for being biased against progressives. So they got exposed for being a propaganda wing of the Democratic Party, which is the corrupt Democratic DNC party, which cheated Bernie Sanders. They got exposed for being that. So that this also serves their purpose too, because they don't want to actually have to talk about that. So what happened in 2016 was that Bernie Sanders happened, and even though the corporate media put a news blackout on him, and it was revealed by Ed Schultz being fired, he told us that NBC would not allow him to even cover Bernie Sanders, and when he tried, they fired him. And so people went around the mainstream news media, and they came to places like this show and the places like the Young Turks. And so they got the information about Bernie Sanders, and he almost beat, even though he was cheated, he still almost beat the most heavily funded political organization in the history of our country. And he did it by going around the mainstream news media. So that is scaring the hell out of them, that they've lost control of the narrative. And so so that's why you're seeing this unbelievable attempt to squash independent news. And so it's because it serves a lot of different interests, not only CNN's commercial interests, but it also serves the Democratic Party, and it also serves the deep state, the intelligence community, as they call them, even though there is no community, because they're the Cold War narratives. That's in their interest to push a Cold War narrative, because that's how their minds work. And the military-industrial complex is thrilled to have a new Cold War, because now we're going to start building nukes again and spending trillions more. And so now we're all caught up in it, the independent news producers. And the thing that really drives me nuts is that the powerful voices on the lefty media are a part of this instead of debunking it. And that's in 10 or 15 or 20 years, they're going to make movies about this. And most of the lefty news media, especially the ones with the most powerful voices, are not going to be the heroes. They're going to be the dupes and the useful idiots and the villains. Rachel Maddow is going to be the villain in the next Good Night and Good Luck movie. Okay, so I don't know if you know what Good Night and Good Luck was, but it was produced by George Clooney, and it was all about the first Red Scare and how the one guy in the news media pushed back against it, and how everybody else was a part of it. And that's what's going to be the new media, and it's going to be Rachel Maddow. It's going to be the Joe McCarthy of that movie. And so that's what people don't understand. This is what's really happening. And so by banning your page and by throttling places like us and Truth Out and Truth Dig and other real lefty organizations, not ones that are carrying water for the establishment. So by that's them getting control of the narrative again. And so CNN has already smeared us, tried to discredit us the thing they always do is they call you a conspiracy theorist, even though they've been pushing the biggest conspiracy at the top of their lungs for 2.5 years without any evidence. And so that's that trick that they do to try to discredit people that are telling the truth or a counter narrative to the establishment. If you tell the truth about Syria, they call you a conspiracy theorist, even though their mainstream news is lying. And they're lying right now, as you pointed out, 100% about Venezuela. The only place I've seen that has reported Venezuela correctly is right here at this show and my other show that I do for the Young Turks. No one else, everyone else is just repeating the John Bolton and Elliot Abrams and Trump's lies about Venezuela. So we're in a shitstorm right now, and it's places like yours and this are literally the last places to be telling the truth to the American people. So they've already figured out how to get rid of you, and they've already tried to smear us twice, the Washington Post, CNN, and it's just a matter of time. They're throttling the shit out of our show, so it's just a matter of time. So as Max Blumenthal pointed out, that this is all about the security state getting more control over social media, right?
Absolutely. You have these social media giants that basically control what we see. And it's total. And in the case of what happened in the Now, it wasn't actually the German Marshall Fund. It was a project of the German Marshall Fund called the Alliance for Securing Democracy.
Yes.
And a part of this whole, in the attempt to be anti-Trump and all pro-resistance or whatever, the Democrats have aligned themselves with neocons.
Yes.
And that's who's in charge of the Alliance for Securing Democracy. It's people like Bill Kristol.
Yes. The dregs of society.
Yeah, no, I mean, the people who sold us the Iraq war are literally now, I mean, these are the people at the Atlantic Council's digital forensic lab are literally now advising Facebook on what constitutes disinformation for them to take down. That is frightening. And it's an attempt for them to shut down any voice that is telling the truth about war.
Yeah.
But I think also, we also should say, like, in the Now's pages ended up getting back up on Facebook. And I think that was a bit of a defeat. It's not the end of this. It's like a part of this is a battle in a longer war. But that's important to note, too, is that we kind of won this round. Like, CNN didn't get to keep us off Facebook forever. And that's really important. And I think right now what's taking place is there's just a massive freak out by the establishment, by the center, and not just in regard to media. I mean, with regard to politics right now, Bernie Sanders is running against it. It's freaking them out. What's happening with Ilhan Omar right now, telling the truth about, Israel and the influence of lobbies is freaking them out. And it's not as easy as it used to be for them to just like BS their way into getting everybody on board for war. It's not simple. It's not the way it used to be. And that's freaking them out. And they're not, even with all the immense power they have behind them, they're not even winning. So I think that my point is, I think we should kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit, because these people feel threatened by us. They feel threatened by us. They feel threatened by your show. They feel threatened by my Facebook videos.
That's amazing. That's hilarious.
That scares them.
The fact that CNN would single us out, a nightclub comedian doing a news show in his garage to smear us, like they didn't single us out to tell the truth about us. They singled us out to lie about us. Isn't that awesome? And so that just shows you, CNN is just, as Noam Chomsky pointed out, they're there to manufacture consent. And if you've ever seen a movie called Broadcast News that was made in the late 80s, starring William Hurt and Holly Hunter, it shows you exactly how people get their jobs in the news media. The reason why Jake Tapper has a job and Chris Hayes has a job is because they're like the beard of a horrible corporation. So they're the face front. They're the palatable face that they put on this horrible corporation that's doing all this nefarious shit. They're the beard. So Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer, they're the beard for these horrible corporations because they look like nice people. Chris Hayes is a nerd. He wouldn't lie to you about Venezuela and Bernie Sanders. Yes, he would. Yes, he would. Chris Hayes is a liar, and he gets paid handsomely to do it. And so is Rachel Maddow is not only a liar, but an unhinged lunatic, and the rest of the world is noticing. And yet CNN runs stories smearing us as somehow we're pushing a narrative when the MSNBC has been completely outed as being a propaganda wing of the Democratic Party. But listen, have you guys thought about suing?
I mean, here's the issue is with these massive social media giants, they're private corporations. They can do whatever they want. Like, you don't have grounds to sue them. They can shut you down and not give you a reason, and that's within their right. And that's a different aspect of this that's scary is you have these huge Silicon Valley giants that can do whatever they want, but then they're also under pressure by governments to censor. And Facebook does it in other countries. Like Facebook and Twitter both do it in other countries.
They do it at the behest of the Israeli government all the time. Mm-hmm. We've covered that here too. It's just disgusting. What's more disgusting is the failure of the left. This kind of stuff has always existed, except that there used to be a left pushing back against it. And the horribleness is it's now the left are either wittingly or unwittingly pushing it themselves. And it's really a heartbreaker. But listen, Rania, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it seems like the era of Trump has sort of broken people's brains.
Yes. Trump has been the undoing of lots of good news journalist people and lots of news organizations. They've been the undoing of them. And it's been the doing of our show because we get to show just how easy it is to do a better job than corporate news media. With zero training, all I have is a bullshit detector and 20 years in as a nightclub comic, and I can do a much better job than they're doing. And that's not hyperbole. I'm actually doing much better coverage of Russiagate and Venezuela and Syria than the mainstream news media will ever do, ever has done, and ever will do. And it's not hard. You know why? I'm not bought by anybody, so I'm allowed to tell the truth. All those people on the TV are bought and paid for, and that's why we have Trump as president. Rania, thanks for being our guest, and good luck, and please keep us appraised. Where can people find your stuff?
Facebook and Twitter. Follow me at Rania Kalik. Okay. And follow In the Now.
All right. Until you're banned,
thanks, you guys.
We will follow you until you're banned. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Bye, Jimmy.
We're announcing our dates for 2019. We're going to Ventura Comedy Club, March 31st, Tempe, Arizona, Austin, Texas, Portland, Chicago, and lots more. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a list of all our dates and live shows. And please become a patron. We give you hours of bonus material. And please make sure you're subscribed. Even if you think you're subscribed, they unsubscribe people every day, and you might be one of them. Check to make sure you're subscribed, and then you have to click the bell twice so they send you a notification when we drop a video. Thanks for your support.